Well, it's Monday already. I mean, time's going so fast. So I don't know if it's just me. I think it's when you get old, time goes faster. And I'm not sure why. Yeah, laugh, Ross. So this is the Blue Ribbon Committee for the Quality of Life Master Plan. Thank you all for agreeing to participate. You were kind of drafted, and so we're so glad to have you here. It's really a wonderful group, and we're going to get a lot of different. We're going to get a very diverse opinions about things that we need to cover in the Quality of Life Master Plan, because we've covered a lot of business disciplines and careers and professional disciplines. So I will introduce the Mayor Pro Tem, is this small boy sitting beside me here. Matt Ron. So the meeting is now called to order, so let's just go over. This is meeting number 2. The meeting objectives are we're going to review the QLMP's role related to the general plan update, policy program and project priorities, review healthy and livable community and economic prosperity core values, goals, indicators, and potential implementation projects. And we're going to discuss potential refinements to those core values, and we'll review next meeting topics. And, the city has a general plan. All cities have a general plan, and that used to be the roadmap for the city. But as we developed the Quality of Life Master Plan, it really did become the roadmap for the city. So what we're doing here today is very, very meaningful and will help to guide Temecula for the next 160 years or so. So thank you for participating. And so...
Should we,
First item on the agenda is the flag salute.
Yeah. All right. So, and he's ready up there. So, hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's roll.
Okay, let's roll. Good evening. Welcome, everyone, back. And we'll check our mic here, make sure we're better. Thank you. Thanks to our IT team. Again, great setup here for us. Again, I'm Andy Pindoli. I'm part of the project team that City's brought on board here, and I'll introduce a couple other members in a moment. So I'm your trusty facilitator for tonight. And we've got a great agenda here tonight. Most of you were with us last time. We kind of got started talking big picture about the nature of the QLMP, your role as a committee, and things we'll start to look at and start to get initial input from you, which we're starting to bring forward into the process. So it was a great start in the first meeting. But tonight, we're looking forward to moving into talking more closely about some updates to the process. We've got a couple nuts and bolts around timing, our schedule with you. We want to recap a couple things in the operating framework that we provided you last time, and I know you've gotten your packet. But then we want to get into more of the meat, and I know many of you are really excited about getting into more details, content of this Quality of Life Master Plan. And we want to talk a little bit about clarifying, because we know there have been some questions, and I think we and the staff know we want to kind of firm up more specifically, as the mayor just touched on, how does this relate to the general plan? You've been hearing, and some of you experienced, that the QLMP really guides the future of the city and virtually everything the city does. But a little bit more specifically, what does that mean in terms of decision-making, policy development, and the general plan, as the mayor said, is a key part of helping to make that work. So we want to talk a little bit more about that tonight, kind of try and unpack any of the mystery around that tonight a little bit more. But then we want to start moving into these core values, which, as you know, are really the foundation of the QLMP. We want to start talking tonight about healthy and livable communities and economic prosperity and what those mean. And so we have, as you all know, as you've gotten immersed in the QLMP in the past, if not more recently, we have some definitions of what those mean, those goal statements. There's indicators about how we measure those. There's programs and projects that have been pursued in the past. And we want to take tonight is about, in both those core values, about unpacking those a little bit. What have we accomplished so far? When we think about the goals for both of those core values, what needs to be updated and refined to reflect the next 20 years for you, based on the things that have been accomplished and new and emerging priorities? So in general, that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to get into details. We're going to look at, those of you who want to look at numbers and crunch numbers a little bit. We get to look at the indicators a little bit that help us to measure the progress overall. But we're also going to talk about overall intentionality too, and about how we'll, how we shape these goals. So any questions on the agenda for tonight? Okay, good. Well, we have you until 8 o'clock tonight. We think we knock on wood, I think we've got a pretty decent approach to cover everything tonight. So appreciate you continuing to work with us on the process, the agenda. So first of all, we want to get into recapping a little bit about the process, and specifically with the general plan. How does the all the work you do and the QLMP relate to the general plan, which is an important part of the city? And for that, I think Matt's going to come up and talk a little bit more closely about those processes. So, yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Everyone hear me? Okay. Good evening. So before we dive into the agenda and the 2 core values, what we wanted to do was just kind of provide some context, talk about the big picture, and then answer a couple of questions. The first being, where does the QLMP fit into the overall work plan for the general plan update? And then how does the city use the QLMP document? So the general plan, which is this document in the binder, is the city's blueprint for the future, for future growth and development. And state law requires 9 elements. And those 9 include land use, open space, conservation, housing, environmental justice, circulation, noise, air quality, and safety. And I bring those up because they all are going to relate to the QLMP update. So the last comprehensive update to the general plan was back in 2005. We have amended it over the years, but we're now beginning the process of that comprehensive update. So over the last several months, we've been meeting with the general plan update subcommittee consisting of Mayor Edwards and Mayor Pro Tem Ron. And they've given us some pretty specific feedback, specifically 2 directives. The first being phase the update over time using grant money. And then the second, update the quality of life master plan first as the foundation for the general plan update. So we're all familiar, everyone has a copy of the QLMP and the 6 core values. Tonight we're going to go over healthy and livable city and economic prosperity, and then the remaining 4 up on the screen. But the point of showing this graphic is that the QLMP is going to serve as the foundation for the general plan, and then we're going to slot those general plan elements underneath the appropriate core values. So really the QLMP and what you're working on is the foundation for our general plan update. This graphic is really our internal diagram, our phasing and work program for the general plan update. I won't go through all the details here, but the important thing to note is that phase 1 is nearly complete and we're moving into phase 2. Again, that's the majority of that phase 2 work effort is the QLMP update. And you can see it's multi-year. We're looking at finishing the general plan update in about 2025. So just to set this up a little bit more, the QLMP is a broad level planning document. What we want to stress is that it's visionary, it's big picture, and it's not required by state law. I'm happy to say that because most of the things I'm working on are required by state law. And I think it's important to note that we're doing it because this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do at the local level, and it's the right thing to do for the city of Temecula.
And very few cities do this.
Very few cities do this. In contrast, the general plan is required by law. Very important document as well. Just for visual effect, you can see the difference. General plan, QLMP, and the beauty is in its simplicity. And that's my next bullet point. Simple and effective. So in the document, there's a dashboard of indicators to measure progress, or what we refer to as the metrics. And then the document also provides the city council and staff direction on projects, programs, and initiatives. So an example of a strategic program and initiative in the QLMP under Healthy and Livable City The program was work with the medical community to develop a comprehensive local healthcare system that includes at least one hospital. That program, those are basically the marching orders for the city council and exec staff to work with the private sector and land a hospital. And we checked that one off the list. And then another example is how goals in the quality of life master plan turn into projects. So another example is under transportation, mobility, and connectivity core value. One of the goals was complete the missing links of the bike trails and pathways as identified in the master plan and show an increase from the 2011 baseline. And this is the top part of one of our CIP or capital improvement project sheets. You can see there's a title, a project description, and then in that, in order to make it into the CIP, we have to identify the benefit and identify the core value. So this is a very important part of our process and our culture and how we go through the budgeting process at the city of Temecula. So hopefully that sets things up, big picture, as you get into the two core values tonight. Last thing I want to leave you with is that the data and the metrics are important, but don't get stuck in the weeds. I did a Google image for Stuck in the Weeds, trying to spice up my my presentation
It took
tonight.
me a minute, okay?
And,
It took me.
and that's what showed up. So
I thought, how'd that fish get out of the water like
Yeah.
that? He's obviously still in the water.
you know, don't put your head in the sand, don't get stuck in the weeds. And then finally, think outside the box and make no small plans. See what you can get in here.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Any questions for Matt about what he just went over, kind of the, how, again, the connection between the general plan, the QLMP, give that example of how, these goals, this guidance led to getting projects done. Any further question on that? Clarification? No? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Matt. All right. My clicker go. Here it is. Okay. So let's continue on a little bit more here. Just circle back with you. Appreciate a lot of flexibility. I think since we met with you last, I know Matt's been in touch, looking at how we can further refine our upcoming dates with you as scheduled. So we want to circle back and a couple things. One, just kind of firm up the dates as we have them calendared right now and give you a sense of the topics we'll be covering in each of those meetings. So obviously tonight, you're familiar with tonight already. We're looking forward to our next meeting with you to focus on safe and prepared community, a sustainable city, and transportation, mobility, and connectivity. So 3 topics there, healthy amount of content to cover in that meeting. And on January 20th, accountability and responsiveness in city government, equity, and the city vision overall. We talked about, you remember from those of you who know our council had their workshop to start things off. We had a conversation with you about how do we really define, at the end of the day, we're talking about core values. What does that mean in terms of an overall vision? How do we define that? I think all of the work you're going to do together, all the input we're going to hear from the community, your friends and neighbors and colleagues out there, they're going to provide a lot of insight too about what do we want our community to be, to look like, to experience. What do we want to experience in 2040? So we're going to circle back with you kind of near the latter portion of the project, going to see, what has emerged overall? How do we articulate that together? And then, of course, certainly not last and certainly not least, in February, we'll look at implementation projects and priorities. Now that we have a clear sense of those values, how we're refining them, those goals and priorities, what are the types of projects that we think are going to help deliver and achieve that vision and meet the values as we define them overall. And then last, we'll meet with you in April to have the full draft QLMP and have a conversation with you about your feedback and hopefully, I think probably a blessing from you to move this forward up into the process to bring it eventually to City Council. So we wanted to circle back with you on meeting dates and topic schedule and just check in. Any questions on those dates? Yes, sir, Ross.
Yes. Thursday, October 28th, are we still having that meeting or is it canceled?
That has been pushed to the 18th. Yeah, so we did a little, so that November 18th date, I'm looking just to confirm, I think that's, we bumped it essentially to the 18th, yeah. So that 28th date, basically we moved it to the 18th and it kind of did a cascading, I think a couple other edits. So, yeah.
So we have no March.
Yeah.
In the original handout, we had given a bunch of dates.
Right.
Throw that one away. These are the new dates.
Yeah. We'll of course circle back after tonight. We always like to follow up with this content with you for your records. You'll have this in your email as part of your records too. So, any other questions on that kind of process, flow, and order of things? Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. And then we wanted to circle back to one of the things you remember we talked about, this kind of organizing framework that we offered to you. And I think in your packet, to those of you who still have those documents, I think it's the blue handout for those of you who still have it. And we offered that to you for discussion just to help to kind of confirm, well, how do we propose this committee working together? You know, how do we operate, as we say, and organize ourselves? So, and we just wanted to recap and refine, because I know to some extent there was some follow-up questions of staff about, you know, a little bit more specifics on your role, and wanted to circle back. And first of all, of course, you know, overall directions on updates to the vision and the core values overall for the QLMP. You know, your thoughts about that, about how those should be refined. And then specific key community-based core values and goals. You know, what do we need to do to update to reflect where we are today and what we're envisioning for the future? And then more specifically, the strategies, the priorities, and progress indicators, more of the how, right? How are we going to know? How are we going to move forward in moving forward these priorities, these projects? And how will we know what success will look like, right? That's what indicators help us to do. But then also importantly, your help in getting out to reaching out to the broader community. You know, each of you wears, I think, multiple hats, right, in the community, different community associations, your professional work. You know, you're a neighbor, you're a resident, you're a friend, your family. And, you know, we look forward to your help in getting the word out to the broader community about how they can get involved and provide input as well. And we'll talk more about that a little later tonight. So we wanted to circle back and just kind of confirm the organizing framework, as we called it, and just double check any questions again about your role and how we'll work together a little bit more closely. Any questions on that? Okay, great. And I do want to, you know, Matt mentioned just at the end of his brief presentation, as much as we'll show you some detail, right? We'll get into indicators, for example, and look at some numbers. You know, I think the overall still the QLMP does speak to that higher level, right? That larger vision, those core values, you know, that general direction we move in overall. So I think that's where we're hoping to work closely with you, is making sure we have that foundation clearly well defined moving forward. So appreciate you working with that. I think this is a duplicate. I apologize for that. So, all right. Well, with that, let's move into it. We want to start getting into the details of these core values, and we're going to start with healthy and livable community. And with that, I think I'm going to bring up Doug Svensson, who you all recall with Applied Development Economics, part of our project team here, and he's going to just give a brief overview and recap of this core value, how it was defined originally, of course, in the QLMP, and that'll tee up some initial work together about how looking at it today and how it might refine moving forward.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's great to see everyone this evening. Just to introduce this core value, it's kind of the major underpinning of a lot of the other material in the QLMP because it is very broad and comprehensive. But it includes a number of different elements, including the environment, both the quality of the natural environment, but also the built environment and the livability that's associated with that. It includes access to a wide range of economic and educational opportunities, access to cultural and religious and recreational, shopping, entertainment resources, so a variety of the amenities that contribute to the community's quality of life. And then finally hits the nail on the head with, you know, the ability to have a healthy and safe lifestyle. And what we'd like to do with these discussions is begin with the goal statements and kind of review how those goal statements sit with what we think today in terms of what we'd like to move forward with. And we talked last time about some of the drivers of change in the community and how some of those things have changed in the last 10 years. And then we'll get into the indicators in more detail and look at those and see how they match up. And then finally, we'll get down to specific projects that could go into the QLMP to actually help move this core value forward. And again, as Andy mentioned, we have a whole meeting planned at the end of the process to revisit implementation projects. So tonight, we're just looking for things that are top of mind or things that come to you as we're having this discussion. We'll revisit in more detail options for implementation as we go forward. So just to briefly recap the goals, and I'm not going to read these verbatim, they were in your packet, and hopefully you had a chance to take a look at them, but just to kind of review the topics that are covered. First of all, being a sustainable community through protecting the natural environment, maintaining the city's fiscal health, which again has its own core value later on, and supporting the community's health and equity, being a diverse community, supporting people of all ages and backgrounds, the value of churches and temples and religious organizations in the community, becoming a regional medical center. That was, as we know, a big focus at the time, still very relevant, but it's a very specific goal. Phasing Old Town into a mixed-use residential and culturally rich downtown. So how are we doing on that? Is there more to do? Providing accessible recreation, sports and cultural, health and therapeutic and community engagement facilities. So we'll talk quite a bit tonight about parks and recreation, but also the cultural venues in the community and the cultural events that go on. Build a teen village for youth. So that was a major idea that was prominent then, and we should revisit how that fits into our priorities today. Support healthy and active lifestyles by promoting recreation programs, parks and trails, and so forth. So again, we'll talk quite a bit about what the city is doing to plan parks and recreation programs. Be a community where local history is remembered. So that's extremely important, particularly with the old town the way that it is. And so that sort of historical culture is a major element. And then finally, ensure a variety of housing choices for different life stages. And we've talked about that several times already in our discussions. So Andy has got an exercise for all of you to participate in to help us think about how these things prioritize today.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Doug. All right. Now, for this exercise, I actually need you to have your smartphone. You're all being very polite and diligent. I see nobody using their smartphone, which is very thoughtful. But I actually now want to offer to you to pull out your smartphone, or if you have an iPad handy or a laptop. So we're going to use actually an online tool here in just a moment. And just to kickstart the conversation, we want to get a sense from you about, as you look across these goals, which still do you think have some relevance for moving from here forward, right? For the next 20 years for the city. And which maybe, this goal, it had its place. We accomplished some things. It still has some relevance, but, I would maybe say not as significant as in the past. Or maybe there's a goal or two that you feel is ready to be retired in place of new goals. So we're going to start the conversation just looking at each of these. And so let me cue this up here. So you see at the very top of the screen, there's a website I want you to go to, and just, a normal browser on your phone is fine. Or if you have an iPad. So it's menti.com, menti.com. I apologize for small font for those of you further back. menti.com. And then you'll get to a page, and you should see pretty much right in the middle, it wants a code. And the code is, I'll read this for those of you who can't see it, 40 46 030.
4046-030.
Yep. And another way, 4046-030. How's that working? How many? Is it working for you? Okay. So now the exercise here on your screen is what you can essentially do is move each goal up and down in a relative priority ranking, right? So it's kind of a ranking exercise. So take a couple minutes, a few minutes, and as you look across these, the ones that you think, obviously, again, the highest relevance, most important, you're going to put those higher up your list, right? First, second, third, fourth, perhaps. And those that you feel like, it's seen its day, or less, we should keep it around, but it's less critical, a little further down your list. Anyone having a problem? I just want to make sure there's no. Don't use it. Okay, no problem. No problem. Yeah, we're going to have conversation too, by the way. This is just it's a handy tool sometimes just to kickstart conversation, but we do really want to get into discussion with you after you've had a chance. So I think after you've done your kind of ranking, if you will, moving things where you want, I think at the very bottom of your screen probably says submit or something like that. And we're not holding anybody to any sort of ranking or scoring or any sort of formal comment per se. So yeah, as soon as you've done your initial ranking, go ahead and you should be able to scroll to the bottom of your screen and see some sort of, to say submit or something. It's very slow. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, there we go. So some of you have started to submit. One of you has. Just take your time. Okay. I know.
What chart?
Yeah. All seriously, I apologize. I know it's one of the downsides of this tool. It's a very interesting, it's a cool tool. It's really helpful for facilitating conversation, but yeah, things like this are make it challenging. So I apologize. When we get into the conversation, I'll do a little narrating here for those of you who are having a hard time seeing. And actually, I think on your end, those of you who submitted, do you see the results on your phone now? Do they show up on your phone or no? Okay.
Oh, it says wait for the presenter.
Ah, okay. Wait for me. All right. I have all the control. You got to wait. All right. All right. So I see 11 of you, and I've counted, let's see, about 15 of us here tonight. 5, 10, 15, about 18 of us. So I think there's 5 of you still working on it.
Problem, yeah.
I'm thinking too much.
Passing. Did you yours already or you? Okay. All right. How are you doing? Okay, it looks like most of you have weighed in. For those of you who are still, by all means, take your time, go ahead and finish up. Let's start chatting though about what we're seeing here, and I will do a little narrating here. I do apologize for the size of the font. So here's looking at a top 4. And by the way, the relative length of the bars gives you a sense of, right, how many of you made that as a higher priority, right? So first of all, at the top, the first 3, first one being be a diverse community that values and supports people of all ages, backgrounds, and religious beliefs. Second, support healthy and active lifestyles by promoting recreation programs, parks, trails, competitive facilities for swimming, tennis, soccer, baseball, basketball, and other sports. And then third is be a sustainable community that embraces the residents' quality of life through protecting the natural environment, maintaining cities' physical health, and supporting communities' health and equity. And I'll say the fourth one, a little bit of switch in the order there. Ensure a variety of housing choices for different life stages. So, and again, not to get overly, scientific on the poll here, but again, I think those top 4, right? You see that there was a healthy number of you that kind of put those in the top 4. So that's I think, pretty telling. So, we just had a 5th move up. So I wanted to, maybe just starting there, just kind of some reaction, your thoughts as to why, looking at kind of the top 4 there, healthy and active lifestyles, sustainable community, diverse community, and a variety of housing choices. What kind of, why did you elevate those of you who ranked those kind of on the higher end? Any just kind of thoughts, reflection, reaction? Those of you, Juan, please.
At least for me, as I scan those, I know I may have selected 1 or 2 of those top 4, but it seemed like part of them encompass other parts. So if you get that one towards the side, you sort of filter down and get some of these other ones as well. So it seemed like a nice, more holistic answer.
Good. Oh, because so some of those are more comprehensive compared to
Yeah,
the
that's
other
where I was
ones?
going with
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good point. For instance, build a team village for the youth. It's quite a specific, right? As opposed to something that's more support healthy and active lifestyles across programs. So that's kind of where you're coming from. Okay. I see. Okay. Good. Yeah, Denise, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think because if you have a healthy community, you have a thriving community. And that's basically where you want to start with the foundation.
Okay. Great. Good. Excellent. Yeah, other thoughts, please, Chris.
Yeah, so I'm on the Community Services Commission, so I'm a little biased. But what I've seen over the course of the last couple of years in my profession and in my home life as well is extreme demand for outdoor spaces, just for people's sanity, for their mental health, for their physical health. And it's no surprise to me that that's ranked number 1. I know it was top for me as well, just because I believe it's extremely important in our community and for the quality of life of our residents.
Great. Excellent. Yeah, let's come to, David, and then we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just to add on to what Chris is saying there, as we address the housing options in Temecula and look to maybe higher density housing, more affordable housing, I think those open community spaces are going to be even more important. So I'd put a second vote on open spaces.
Yeah. So these couple examples of where the connectivity among these. So if not, as Juan was saying earlier, if some of these don't envelop in some of these larger goals, there's also the connectivity between some of these goals being mutually supportive as well. Okay, excellent. I want to go to Mayor Pro Tem Ron and then Kathy.
I was thinking about this reviewing some of the materials ahead of time, and it occurred to me that healthy and livable communities are 2 separate topics, right? And so the one thing that I feel this quality of life master plan would benefit from is to pull those 2 pieces apart, right? And I know staff is just like, oh, come on, because every time we have one of these, I'm always like, or we could do plan B. But really, I mean, front and center. So if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy, right? The first one is physiological needs, right? Then after that is safety. So we're kind of going through this, and I kind of wonder if maybe the quality of life master plan should almost be structured in that same sort of hierarchy, right? Because at the very base of this, the one thing we're not talking about, but it's embedded in some of this, but we're not pulling it out individually. We talked about the hospital. Hospital is an incredibly important asset to our community, but then so is mental and behavioral health, right? And yet we don't have that as a healthy communities piece. So if we wanted to have its own standalone healthy community initiative, let's say, what would be our core values for that? And I don't see a lot of that listed, although they're embedded in these topic areas. But to call out some of the core values just in healthy communities, so behavioral health is a good one. But then to get even more basic than that and say, healthy water supply, clean air, right? Some of the real, before we even get to open space and recreation and that, right? Do we have the opportunities? Do we have every Temecula'n who wants to be sheltered? Do we have an opportunity to shelter them, right? And hit that very core platform first. And if we can't, I hate to say that, but if we can't get that one right, then we can't move up to that next level. I mean, that's the whole point of this hierarchy, right? So I wonder if maybe we take just a slight step back and say maybe healthy communities as its own piece gets pulled out separately, because then this ranking would potentially look a lot different. Yeah. So I don't mean to, sorry, Luke and Matt, but it just kind of occurred to me that maybe that's an important place to start.
Thank you. And I'll offer, in terms of process, and I know staff agree, this is the time. We're at a pivotal point now for the 2040, for the QLMP 40, as they say, is to look at how these are articulated, these goals, these core values. Now's the time to think about, yes, that you're all valuing them, they're important, but are there new ways to characterize them, to organize them, additional content, as Mayor Pro Tem was just saying, about including, specific indicators and things that make sure we're getting right. And now's absolutely the time to talk about those options.
Well, and just to drive it home a little bit more, if you talk about, diversity or inclusion as, and that, I can't read that top one, but if I recall, that's kind of what was the theme of the top one. I think we all agree that that's a priority within the community, right? So it's nice to see that filter toward the top.
Right.
But again, if you can't provide the basic needs of the community from a health perspective, then you're a long way off from being able to address, diversity or inclusion or equity, right?
Great.
So, I will stop there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. No, absolutely. We'd like to hear more from all of you. I want to come to Kathy and work our way down here. But as Mayor Pro Tem's kind of opened up, definitely want to hear from you. To be clear, the exercise wasn't so much, let's just keep the same goals we have and reorganize them a little bit from this exercise, but it's to start this conversation and be thoughtful about, again, what's kind of still relevant for us. Take, this first one currently at the moment, for example, support healthy and active lifestyles. It's clearly still important to many of you here, but we may articulate that goal a little bit differently, as we move forward in the coming weeks and months. There might be a different angle, if you will, speaking to, for example, some of the elements that the Mayor Pro Tem just brought up. So I want to be clear with you. We definitely want to hear from you about, what's missing here? Or, the seventh one or the eighth one, I ranked a little bit lower, but I think it's still important, but I think we need to think of it in a different way, just as an example. So we want to hear that spectrum from all of you. So Kathy, thank you for waiting. And then I think we wanted to hear from Darlene, and we'll come around this way.
Thank you. And I would just echo and agree with Mayor Pro Tem's statements. When I reviewed this and was going through it this morning, it just seemed like a very broad category that just encompassed so many things that could have and should have maybe been in other areas.
Mm-hmm.
But what I reflected on the whole healthy city, 10 years ago, I was younger. We'll just go with I was younger. I was in a demographic I was younger, and I had younger kids. They were 10 and 11. And so having a healthy city, it was like, yes, we want a hospital, but that's all my mind could think of for healthcare. Now that I'm getting closer to an older age, it is more important to me that I want to have good access to healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to need more healthcare, and I'd like to be able to get it here in our community. So that I would love to maybe see that health aspect separate.
Okay.
And more importance on
There
it.
are going to be things that overlap too,
Yeah.
from one segment to another. So,
And I
Right.
think as I just kind of reflected on where I'm seeing things are coming up on here, when I think back to 10 years ago, we had a lot of children that were 10, 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the category that we're now seeing as a decrease in our population, that 20-somethings.
Right.
10 years ago, if you would have asked me to rank this, I would have said, build me that teen center so that they have somewhere to hang out. Now it's like, not so important. What am I worried now as an almost empty nester? I want my health care, and I'd like to have a smaller house. I don't have to clean all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I want more options to housing. So I kind of see that a reflection of that aging of our
Yes.
population in
Thank
the city and where I'm seeing things rank.
Thank you, Kathy. And I think and it's part of your charge collectively, right? Coming from your personal experience and where you were 10 years ago to where you are today in the next 10 to 20 years, but also reflecting on what, we looked at demographic data last time, right? About how the city's changing. So I appreciate you reflecting on that too, Kathy. We do ask of you to think more broadly as well about beyond obviously your own personal kind of where you are, but coming from that, where else do you see the community
well, the
continue to
elephant
change?
in Sacramento's, it's all about housing now, and we like to call it attainable housing.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have places for people to live, nothing else matters.
Right.
So.
I will say, as a community services commissioner, recreation is still very important.
Okay. Get that on the record. Yeah. Got to make sure we squeeze that. Yeah, I know. We heard that from Chris too. So thank you, Darlene. And then we'll check in. I think, yeah, I'll work my way down the table and we'll come back this way too. So, yeah.
I think number 6 is kind of phrased a little bit dated.
Yeah.
At the time when this was put together, it was more about, licensed beds per capita type of a concept. And, we're just a very expensive hotel if you don't have physicians, and when I opened the hospital in 2013 and really assessed the community, and not a lot has changed, there's a huge shortage of physicians. And, people go to their doctor. They don't, you go to the hospital to see your doctor. You don't go to just hang out in the bed. So I think that's really more important, is really a focus on building up the physician base in the community. That's who's going to take care of everyone as we age and develop diseases and those types of things. If we don't address all those things to make it attractive for a physician want to be in this community, we won't have the doctors here.
Right.
But it's really looking at, do we have the specialists to treat individuals? And that's a lot of what happened during, the COVID pandemic, is individuals didn't see their physician for about a year.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the impact of that in the hospital filling up because the health has changed if you don't see your physician.
Right.
So I think that's an important aspect.
Thank you. Great. So yeah, that's a good example of one that we may shift from a facility focus but more professional capacity focus, for example. Yeah, Sandy.
So thinking about what Matt said and what Darlene just said, it seems to me that I hope we're all in agreement that we need to divide what physical health and mental health look like. They should be probably separate under the umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk about specialists, we need more mental health specialists like nobody's business out here. It's like there's nothing, there's hardly anybody.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Good. Let me come over to this side of the I'm sorry. Let me come to Ann and then we'll come to Lene. Please go ahead. Amy, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's great. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the family dynamics that are changing out there. And I see that in these value changes here. And I would like to kind of focus on trying to not just say what we need right now, but continue to create a city that will accomplish the goals that we want. And so what I mean is, I see a community that is multi-generational, that we provide an environment that it is fruitful and helpful and loving. It's easy for me to have my grandmother live with me and have my special needs son live with me because they all have what they need. Right. And that means much higher density housing, in the area. Now, that's not what we thought we needed 10 years ago, because we all thought we wanted to be in, single family homes. And we thought that was the highest level of living together as a community. But honestly, in today's society, we don't all live with our family like we used to. So I would like to kind of take a stronger look at that healthy living within a higher density possibility. And I know that's not everybody's favorite, but I think if we want to do it right, this is the right time to study that. And then the other biggest part is the two parents working. I think that having that with the cost of living right now, it is just not possible to have one parent stay home and live in a single family home or at all. And so I think those kinds of things need to be looked at when it comes to all of the, having a decent place for people to live. But also, I think it's still important for us to have a healthy lifestyle, because we need us all to live better and calmer so that we can make the best decisions for our family.
Great.
So I think that's important as well.
Thank you, Amy. So I want to come to Lene, was waiting here. In a few minutes, I do want to bring up the indicators. We'll start to look at kind of from a numbers perspective, the indicators from the 2010 QLMP, and think about, it's kind of similarly, what's still relevant and what might still be missing. I think there's going to be a lot of ideas based on what we're starting here. Thank you for waiting, Lene. Yeah.
Sure. So, number one, that was definitely my number one. And I agree with Matt in that's like full of so many things. And one that I think it's full of that is clear down on number 7, which I didn't put it on number 7, is the growth of our faith-based community. And I think we need to make sure that that's also a priority when we're talking about a healthy, livable community. So I don't want that to get lost.
Right.
I want to make sure that that's part of what we're talking about.
absolutely. I do want to just stress for you, this exercise wasn't about, gee, can we cut off 2, 3, or 4 from the bottom tonight? That's not what the purpose was. Yeah, just to get a sense. So I appreciate you reflecting back that that's, as an example, the value, the growth of churches, temples, mosques, other places of worship, Lene, that, that is still important. We still need to be thoughtful about what that means for community members and livability and health overall. Not Scott.
Ernie.
You want to? I'm sorry. Can you I apologize. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes,
Yeah.
Ernesto Sanchez. Yeah, I represent Rancho Community Church and Schools, and then I'm pastor for the Spanish ministry. But I'm very interested on the number 10 because it's so specific, and probably that's what it draws attention to the bottom.
Yeah.
But if we like the way we operate at the school in church, I'm sorry, it's that we allow the youth to drive the conversation of the top, and they're the ones actually we're handing the keys for them to drive that conversation because they're the ones that are interested in the healthy and the sustainable diversity and making sure that housing, that's the type of conversation they're having. So probably the number 10, it deserves an update to be updated. That goal, probably that goal is like a little, like even to me, if you told me I want to build 18 like village, to me it's like, what's that? Like, is that like, we have Disneyland right there. I can just go there.
Right.
But what's in Temecula, something that it deserves, like, how can we invest in the next generation? I think that would be
It's a little higher level, right? As
yeah,
opposed to
not
just
because
a
that sounds like
specific village.
Disneyland in a miniature.
I appreciate that. Would like to hear from all of you too on those items that, this was quite a specific one, but, definitely want your reflections on how any of these, you might update any of these, not just ones on the, near the bottom end, but even at the top, as we've talked about, to better, again, articulating where you are at today and what you're seeing moving ahead to 2040, which is, you think would be a little bit different from where you were 10 years ago. So good.
Andy.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add, because this came up last time, we will be reaching out to youth in government or AP government classes to try to get the younger generation and get their input as part of this process. So we're working with them.
Good. Yes,
you actually took the words right out of my mouth. Okay. When I was thinking about this topic, what came to mind for me was, so health and livable communities for who, right? And if we're seeing a decline in our 20-something residents, how do we know what's going to attract them? How do we know it's going to pull them in? So I think we really need to make sure to hear from them.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're going to give you an update on community engagement activities that we're planning, by the way, before we wrap tonight. So more specific thoughts from all of you about what we'll do moving forward. So, Mayor
Can I just, Mr. Peters, when we do the outreach to the schools, can we make it a little bit more broad? And the only reason I say is because there's, I didn't take the AP classes, believe it or not. No, seriously. I was just like, graduate high school, but I know, I got my act together after the fact, but I'm not sure that's just 100% representative of, youth in Temecula. And maybe there's folks who would have been or could have been or would have liked to have been part of AP classes and all that who aren't represented there. And maybe we're not capturing the full, perspective of.
The point is well taken.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And we need to check in with the alternative schools too, Rancho Vista, the other high schools.
We were very intentional back when we did the youth master plan, to both of your points specifically. We had a youth advisory committee back then, and we were very intentional of, those youth in our community that are great achievers, we want them at the table. We also want youth at the table who achieve in other ways, right? And, view success and growth differently. And so we were very intentional there. And I think to the mayor's point as well, thinking about those youth who have, more specific, specialized needs, who maybe aren't always given as much attention as they might need, or different types of attention. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And
I do want to move. I see a couple. I'm sorry, Mayor. Go ahead,
I was
please.
surprised that there was nothing in there about local jobs. So that people don't have to commute. Commuting causes stress. It separates you from your family. It really does have one of the largest impacts on your lifestyle.
Good example of a potential bridge to economic prosperity, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes. And I do want to, I see a couple other hands. I want to take them. I do want to move us on though too. So bouncing here from all of you. But so let's go to Tammy, and then we'll come to Carl. And then let's go to indicators, and we'll still have some time to get more thoughts from you on these goals.
Just super quick, to reiterate that some of the housing comments, I definitely think that we need to look at the external factors that have impacted housing from 10 years ago. I think that people that retire or build a career here in Temecula should not have to be forced to move out of the area to retire. And the same with young people. And we're seeing that a lot, that they're not coming back because of affordability. So the density issue, I think, is, and also innovative transactions with housing so that we can allow people their space and be able to continue to add to units. So that's one thing. And then I just wanted to tag on to the teen thing. I agree with Jose. I think the way that comment was worded is like, what is that, teen village? But really that is a huge thing with our youth, and making sure that we have programs that keep them here and not, my kids were always getting in the car and going outside of the community, and it would have, you know, we need more activities.
Spaces and places for
right.
them. Yeah.
Exactly.
So thank you. Yeah. Good. Let's go to Carl, and then I want to move us on. Doug's going to talk about indicators here. Go ahead, Carl.
What I did was I reached out to somebody who's about 30 years old, and this person left Temecula, couldn't get out fast enough, and then they returned a couple of years ago because of health issues. So they came back, and I asked her, what do you think about the future? And she gave a quite lengthy email that I passed on to some city people.
Yeah.
So people know about it. And I just wanted to share a couple thoughts. One is, because we were talking about, Matt was talking about adding categories. I don't see anything up there about the arts and culture scene. And she mentioned that people who are in their 20s and 30s feel Temecula is just kind of dead in terms of that. I'm just sharing her thoughts.
Sure.
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying that's her thought. A second thing that she mentioned was, and this kind of summarizes her thoughts, is young people who grow up here sometimes can't wait to leave if they feel like it's not a hospitable environment. And obviously we can't reach out to people who left Temecula, or it's hard to do, but it's just something, a thought. And what she mentioned specifically in terms of that was that Temecula has a reputation outside of Temecula, keep in mind, we're not talking about the city itself, but outside the community, as being heavily conservative and slightly racist. And so I guess the question is to just keep that in mind, that that's a viewpoint of some people who are outside the town.
Okay.
And I think we need to at least think about it, be aware of that.
Okay.
And then finally, and I know this isn't going to go over well, but this is kind of an independent thought. On number 7, because I know we have people here from churches and temples, etc. But why is that even on there? And I'm not trying to be silly, but I'm saying this is a government program or objective that we're doing. And church and state, all this stuff. I'm not saying that we shouldn't obviously talk about it, but that why is it on there? That's not government's business to advocate the growth of religion.
Okay.
And especially if you keep in mind, all the surveys show of people in their 20s and 30s, they're drifting away from religion.
Okay.
And if we're trying to promote it, is that, I'm just trying to put the stuff out there. And you can say I'm a fool and whatever else, but I'm just trying to we want different viewpoints.
Right.
And I'm just trying to throw out a couple different thoughts.
And I think, and my general understanding, and we'll have more time in the process to kind of unpack and talk about refining things, but was in terms of I think value being the operative word, just in my interpretation, I'll just offer, and others of you were here at the time.
But once again, that's a government.
Right.
That's not government's job to value churches.
Right. Yeah. So, we can talk about that as we move into the process overall. So,
but I think, Carl, I think that probably came from either surveys or people who participated.
Right. I understand that.
Right.
But I'm just pointing that out, that this is a government document.
Okay.
But I would say the government's role in this process is to ensure, because don't forget what we started at this meeting at was quality of life master plan builds into the general plan.
Right.
And that general plan is all about land use and zoning. right?
Right.
So really the government does have a role in it.
Sure,
And that
of
we
course
have
in
to be
that,
able
right.
to ensure that if that's a value within our community, not endorsed by the government necessarily,
Right.
but if that's a value within our community, we have to be able to ensure that that opportunity exists for those facilities to,
Right.
to be permitted, right? So I would say that, and it may sound like a limited role, but recognize that zoning authority historically has been used strategically to exclude things
Right,
in
I
communities
agree.
as well.
I agree.
So putting that, in the document, I think
Right.
recognizes that it's, something we acknowledge that the community is looking for.
But if the idea is we're looking to the future, and surveys show that 20s and 30-year-old people don't value religion as much as their predecessors.
But not all of them, though.
No, but if the surveys they're very much
Well, wait.
trending in that direction.
Okay.
And they're going to be they're the future of the town.
Right.
And
I think
well,
I'm just gonna share something quick.
Sure.
For example, our community, our faith-based community,
Right.
we serve this community. We serve like about 30, I will say 3,000 families meals
Right.
every week.
Right.
So it's a lot of people. So we do the job. The pretty much we take the lost, we take the people who are broken, and sometimes our job is to restore them, to help them to go back into their feet.
And I think it's all wonderful. I'm just
And I
wondering
understand
if
the part of the
government
youth
should
too,
be-
because the next generation, you're right, there's a trend, but it also has to do the way the church is involved in the community. If we give back to the community, of course, these young people are going to be more attracted to be part of it.
Right.
So I think that's part of
Right.
something.
Right. Anyway, I'm
So
just-
yeah, and I know it's an important topic for many in the community. Obviously, it's part of this framework overall. So as we move into it, and I'd like to bring Doug up to talk about the indicators a little bit more specifically, so we can look to the extent the indicators relate to that. And Mayor Pro Tem talked about.
I just have a burning one for that one. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Because I forgot to say, I thought it's kind of the same but different. I thought that you should maybe add value the growth of churches and faith centers and nonprofit organizations, because those grassroots organizations provide the services and the things that
support
right, that
organization.
support system. And I do sometimes think that we're a newer area, and so nonprofits are hesitant or they don't have the tools in place to start up, but we need them to start up so that we can have more programs. So sorry about that.
Yeah, so maybe that's another consideration for how we articulate, their role in the community and contributions. So thank you. That's helpful. Well, let's. Oops. Excuse me, Doug.
Sure.
Let me come back to here. We talked about. Doug's going to give an overview, and we can still get into these goals here in a moment. But I want to look at it from the indicators perspective for a few minutes, and then we'll talk a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this conversational parallel, what we were just talking about is, how well do these things really match up with what our priorities are today? I'm just going to run through these kind of quickly and give you a little bit of clarification in a couple places. And then, again, we want to mostly have discussion. So Darlene already raised the issue of the hospital beds per capita. So Temecula, or the Southwest Riverside County, has improved from where it was 10 years ago. But if you look at the national trends, 10 years ago, the national average was almost 3 beds per 1,000, but it's all declined because the industry is changing. There's much more emphasis on outpatient care, on providing services out in the community. So the idea of licensed beds capturing that is probably less relevant, and maybe we can easily do an indicator of physicians per capita or even specialists per capita, something that kind of focuses more on the actual service that's getting to people in terms of healthcare. So that's just some food for thought. One of the indicators, though, was the special needs communities in the town and how well they're served through special programs. That has increased. In 2010, the city was offering 12 different programs for various special needs groups, and now that's up to 18, has been up to 20. It comes and goes depending on, the needs at any particular time. Parks and Recreation, as we mentioned in the memo, the city just this last year updated its community services master plan, which provides now a comprehensive Parks and Recreation master plan, and in the document, I copied in a lot of the specific things. I'm going to go through some of that in a moment. So we may really want to rely on that document for maybe a lot of the details around this topic in the QLMP. But just in general, over the 10 years, the population's been growing. The number of physical facilities that the city's been able to add has probably not grown as much. So some of these indicators have dropped off a bit. Just looking at this for myself, I thought, gee, there must have been some real tennis geeks on the Blue Ribbon Committee last time, because that's called out. But those of you in the know that pickleball is the thing these days. So we may want to think about different, or maybe stepping back a little.
There was a shortage of tennis courts for a while.
Right,
Yeah,
I'm sure there were.
People who lived in HOAs got tired of outsiders coming and sneaking in using
There you
their
go.
tennis courts.
There you go. That's probably it. So we may want to think about stepping back and relying on the CSMP for some of the details there, but keeping the basic concepts there. So again, this core value includes an element of housing. In a moment, we'll see there are other elements of housing in economic prosperity. But the percent of single-family housing, we've talked about this before. I presented that data in our first meeting. There has been a shift toward more multifamily housing, but when you compare that to the inventory of single-family housing, the needle doesn't move very much. So another thought might be switching that around, and rather than focusing on the percent of single-family, let's create an indicator that talks about all the new multifamily or other kinds of housing, multi-generational or different designs. So, and again, I'm just throwing some of these ideas out to you for thought. Arts, culture, and lifelong learning. So there's not a lot said in the goals about that, but there are actually several indicators that relate directly to that. And I do want to mention, we just this morning got the explanation for what's going on with the library, and it turns out it's not all bad. It looks like the circulation dropped off, but what in fact happened in 2010, 2 libraries closed temporarily, one for remodeling, one for some other reason. So at the moment we were measuring circulation here in Temecula, it was the only library in the entire area, and everybody was coming here. So it artificially increase that number. Now, having said that, there are some trends. People access library internet services a lot more today, that's increasing. Those numbers don't get counted in the same way, so it's difficult to pick that up. But the librarian assured us that this library is the most well-used in all the county library system still. So maybe that's our indicator, is how do we, what's the level of utilization just in relation to library use in general. But visits to the city museums is increasing. Old Town Community Theater ticket sales are increasing. So people's interest in those venues definitely are showing upswing. So just an update on those indicators. And I think Andy wants to then get your input on, are there other indicators, or should we change some of these?
Yeah, exactly. So kind of dovetailing off the conversation about goals, right? And what's, how those, we may refine those, reflect where you are today and moving ahead in the next 20 years. Do you have thoughts? Granted, there's some specific numbers here and percentages, and we don't, ask you today to give us specific target numbers and percentages right now, but just generally, what other indicators do you think might be more relevant as we move forward? And if you, these are some very specific ones. If you can't think of a specific measurable one at this level of detail, that's okay. We just want to get your kind of general ideas and feedback about things that we can try and find measures for that you think speak to healthy and livable communities. David?
Yeah, thank you. So for acreage, I think that doesn't quite capture the excellent work that our community services department is doing, reinvesting in the parkland that we have. Mm-hmm. So they've been reimagining, retheming our playground equipment, creating a sense of place. So it's not just about the acreage, but what we do with it. Mm-hmm. Accessible parks is a metric centered around pedestrian movement, but could include also active transportation. I think we should look at that, measure how well we're providing, bike paths and other, active
Connectivity to parks.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Tennis facilities, I was just going to mention, you can fit 4 pickleball courts in 1 tennis court. So
Right.
we're already improving there. And then the one glaring omission there that's been mentioned a couple times this evening is something related to mental health. And in conversations I had with Riverside University Health System behavioral health administrator, one of the measures that they pointed me towards was what they call diversions from hospitalization. And that relates to the CBAT program. So I think Sandy mentioned, having more mental health specialists. That's one area where we could use more of them. We pair them with police patrol officers, and they try to respond to those situations that, before they become a code 5150 and require hospitalization, they can divert those people to the social services that they actually need.
Right. Excellent. Good. Great examples. Thank you, David. What are some other specific examples? Let's come to Kim. You go by Kim.
Kimberly.
Kimberly, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to speak towards probably more my experience in travel and tourism and media buying. And I would say heat mapping and being able to really look at our community and being able to determine ways to track through technology, because a lot of this is just old-fashioned tracking. And I think, in our industry, when someone usually asks me if I need something, like if they could build me the best hotel, what would it be? I will tell them, because I am getting that from the consumer, the data that I'm seeing. And the same for, I would say, arts and culture. I support the things Carl Lev is saying specifically in the arts and culture, because we don't have enough resources, so we're just doing what we have. But if we had more, we would probably get more. And I think you would see that by heat mapping to be able to determine where the consumer is when you have 20,000 people in on a weekend. And where are they going when you only have capacity of 100 over here and 50 over here. And so I think it's a better gauge for the city to use heat mapping of what's coming in, which is geo-targeting. So I would definitely recommend those are the things for the future. We need that technology so we're making informed decisions and not just based on hunches. And so I would definitely suggest that for as many things as we can be able to track.
So not just setting numbers and measures, but how we track and think about
through geo-targeting and through zip codes and more technology.
Great, thank you. Kathy, what are your thoughts on kind of indicators that you think might be more relevant, or some other ideas?
Looking at what we have up there, as I reflected on it this afternoon, we're very specific calling out tennis courts.
Right. Yeah.
I know we're building a lot of pickleball courts. I want to go on the record, I am not against pickleball courts, okay? I really am not. But we're being very specific calling out these pickleball courts, calling out aquatic facilities. I know with community services, we've had the skating community that are approaching us that they want more opportunities for skating, not just, I will not use the word that they use for what our skate park is currently. And we don't have an indicator on here. Should we maybe be combining these as some recreational facilities? And another one that I was reflecting on today is we have the community theater. And we're showing that the sales peaked in 2017. Well, I'm like, why? What would cause that? It can't be just because my daughter went to college. What would cause that? Well, as I look back to 2010, and I would say even probably around 2006, 2017, we started having a lot more entertainment venues pop up in Temecula. All the wineries are offering concerts. So maybe we need to change that indicator to include all the venues that we have available, not just
It's a little more holistic venue perspective. That's changed a lot. So, thank you. And I wanted to also reflect too, and the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, back to thinking about separating healthy and livable and the foundational needs. And I think point well taken. I wanted to just note about, those basics about that you mentioned, basic needs. And I think we can work with staff to think about those key indicators, what those reflect, your comments earlier. So, but you want to dovetail on that?
Well, since that was a nice segue, thank you. I was thinking about this again, if we separated out the healthy communities, and I kind of look at it, a few years ago I had asked that the police and fire departments sit at the dais at our city council meetings, and then monthly report, crime statistics or response statistics for fires and, accidents and so forth. And then we get, it's gotten better because now we get trend data and we compare year over year, and, we've gotten a lot of good information. The metrics are interesting, but it doesn't really give us an indicator. And if we're only going to do this every 10 years or so, then, we never have time to steer, the ship, right? So I would see first, an annual report card. If we're going to take the QLMP seriously, an annual report card that comes out that says, here's how we're ranking on these things, and the trend, up or down or stagnant. Okay. But then also, if we want to pull healthy communities out as its own initiative, let's say, then you'd want to have clear metrics. Like air quality is a good example, right? Is air quality getting better or worse, right? And then that would probably feed back into respiratory disorders at the hospitals, let's say, and asthma and so forth, right? But I wonder too, and I was thinking about this, is the Framingham study. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but a lot of what we understand about cardiovascular disease comes from a city in Massachusetts where they've focused for multi-generational on, the city basically, and have this massive data set. And it's how we understood that, cardiovascular disease is related to cholesterol levels and, obesity and, just all of these metrics, smoking, right? Wonderful study. Now, I'm not saying we create a framing on the, unless Darlene, you want to step forward on that. But I wonder too, as we're developing this, how do we measure a healthy community? And it would be through measuring the health of our residents, right? And so it makes me think about two things. One was Lewis Homes had built two communities. I remember hearing about this. They never published it, which was too bad. But anecdotally, they had built two communities basically right next to each other at about the same time. One of them was designed with hiking trails and bicycle trails and parks and all these additional amenities. And one of them was just standard suburban housing. And anecdotally, they went back and kind of looked after many years of these housing communities being opened and said, what's the rate of obesity or heart attacks or strokes or other things? And not surprisingly, the community that had the walkable, bikeable did much better, statistically, whether or not, again, it was all anecdotal, but I always thought, what a missed opportunity to have gone and tracked a baseline and move forward. Well, I kind of wonder if there's a way to work with the hospital to, because we have our annual health fairs, we have these things that we do in the community, and maybe work with the city and our healthcare providers to kind of blow that up a little bit bigger and say, okay, so what is the, is the average cholesterol level in the community increasing? Are we seeing more cases of diabetes? Are we seeing an increase in, suicides or attempted suicides, right? To be able to have those behavioral health and physical health metrics that we could go back to. And obviously it gets really tricky with human subjects and HIPAA and institutional review board and all that. But these can all be overcome if we really wanted to genuinely measure the community. And then the only other thing I would say is if we're going to do, whether we're talking about these metrics or any one of the other metrics we're looking at, I would say we also need to integrate, if we're not going to just do this every 10 years, an adaptive management and adaptive monitoring program, right? Because sometimes I think you're absolutely right. Tennis courts, I mean, I don't know what that's an indicator of exactly, except maybe how much the city has invested in tennis. Right. Because the number of tennis courts doesn't reflect the use of the tennis courts, right? So we could put that number up to 1,000 potentially, but it doesn't mean it's doing our community any good. Right. So some of the metrics we choose, we have to be sort of aware of how good they are at measuring what we think they're measuring, right? But then also be able to sort of adaptively respond to those and say, okay, so that metric isn't the right one, so maybe we need to measure this instead. And then along that pathway, let's say we have really good metrics and we see that, diabetes is increasing in the community. Well, we shouldn't just monitor that and say, well, that sucks, and just kind of let it, run its course and have that, right? I mean, at some point, if you start seeing an uptick in a trend, it's kind of like the crime statistics. We don't just sit there at the council meeting and say, boy, our response times, have gotten, much worse. And we're like, well, okay. I mean, we do something about it, right?
They haven't though. So
they haven't. Yeah. Just to be clear. They've actually gotten, they're great. But, but if we're going to measure anything, then we need some sort of established trigger on the city side or our partner side or nonprofits or whatever to kind of kick in and say, okay, so now all of a sudden we've reached this level and we need to do something about that, right? What do we do?
Okay. Yeah. I've offered too, I mean, I think in addition to our, the hospital community, medical community locally, obviously your county public health, for example, some of the indicators you mentioned could be useful for collecting that data as well, or early sharing that back with you. So just want to check in. I saw a few hands, so
Me.
Good. Yes, absolutely,
Me.
Mayor. And it's just taking inventory here, but Mayor, please go ahead.
As we're having all these discussions and we're looking at assets that the city has, museums and the theater, I want to start thinking outside the box and think of multiple uses for those facilities. Obviously, we've talked about library and circulation, so we're talking about checking out books, but there's so much more to do at the library.
Right.
And it covers all of the quality of life things. It covers the children, it covers the seniors, and the same way with the museums and other facilities like that. And it's a way to bring people together in closer to their homes, first of all, and just to bring them together for different activities, because I think obviously gathering and socializing is a very healthy thing to do, but we have all these wonderful facilities and the city's very good at multi-purpose, but I think we can even expand on that.
So yeah, we're good at multi-purpose, but how we track and appreciate the utilization, maybe that's another term that we can look at closely. So I'm going to come to Amy and then Tammy and then Chris, and then we're going to move on and start talking about economic prosperity.
So I have a nice little healthy list. Keep in mind, I'm an industrial engineer and statistics was my mojo at the time. So
And you're sitting next to Matt. Oh my gosh.
it's trouble.
There's a
over there.
warp in the universe.
The tech corner. But okay, so just running through a couple. Yeah, for sure. Physicians per capita, specialists per capita is extremely important. And then the mental health per capita. Also, if there's any way we could get just number of groups or other activities per capita, I don't have that specific name, because I think just saying person to person in an appointment is not really going to get us to where we need to go, just seeing the trends. So more healthy groups that happen in different communities that collaborate to make that happen.
We can track nonprofits numbers and things.
Well, yeah, and that too. So for instance, exactly. And so also I have to say for special needs community, I love that there's 18, but that's not specific to age. And there is a huge gap in the 18 to 25 as far as groups. So I think for all special needs, that really should be categorized by age. For younger, middle, like elementary, high school, and then young adult, and then also adult and senior special needs, because our special needs community is living much longer, which is a great thing. We just want to make sure it's a fruitful life. When it comes to percentages, multi-gen housing percentage, yes. I think we should also at least acknowledge the percentage of owned versus rented, just for piece of information. When we talk about being a healthy lifestyle, there's a measure they use in Orange County, which is being able to live, work, and play within a 15-minute walk of your home. So not just being able to get to a park that's like a half a mile trail. We're talking about really healthy lifestyles is when you walk to where you shop, when you walk. So it's kind of ingrained in your circle. So yeah, that's how the blood pressure goes down, and that's how you meet your community, is because you're actually outside walking to the market. And then also the outdoor multi-use spaces is a great number to me, like whether it's the park area. I mean, for me, keep in mind those Boy Scouts, those special needs groups, those multi-use groups, we need the canopy and a table and a light, and also what you said about the multi-use with the libraries. Can't the museums and the libraries and the playhouses report how many different groups use their facility through the year? So we don't, whether it's nonprofits that use the museum. And they have, so that's kind of a good measure. That's a collaboration, right? And then also a percentage of Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi hotspots. So the percentage of like the growth of having these, outdoor hotspot areas. And I think that was it. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Tammy, and then we'll come to Terry and Chris, and then we'll move on to economic prosperity. I appreciate you all being as concise as you can.
Two quick ones. One, with my hat on from the chamber, is and with the labor shortage we have, but having a tool where we could reach out for younger seniors to try to engage them in part-time jobs. Maybe that's more relevant to the next topic. I'm not sure. But the second one, as far as an indicator, is I'm the chair for the Board of Governance for the Continuum of Care for the county. And we just recently did a needs assessment. And the needs assessment calls out where some of the gaps are in the county, specifically in Southwest Riverside County, not Temecula specific, but Southwest Riverside. And I think it's really relevant to for discussion purposes as we build this out.
Very good.
Especially in terms of mental health, because it indicates that we've had an underinvestment in programs and services for mental health and other supportive services in Southwest Riverside County. Again, that's not Temecula specific,
right,
but it's an important tool, I think.
Very good, thank you. As a reminder too, that would appreciate all of you, that needs assessment, for example, and a few that have been referenced, please do send those, any links or full documents to Matt, who will help to bring that forward to the full team. So thank you for a reminder about that. Good, let's see, I'm gonna come to Terry and then Chris, and then we'll move on. Terry, did you do your mic, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think a livable city is also a resilient city. And I would like to see as one of the indicators a kind of really proactive effort to assess the threats and vulnerabilities that we face as a city as the environment changes, and to develop strategies to address those.
Right. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. Chris?
I'll try to make it quick. I agree with Matt and Amy about getting to the point where we can walk places and then develop metrics and benchmarks on how to see if that's making a difference here in our community. And I think it goes back to what David said about active transportation. And Gary left me with tons of notes here, but from the Quality of Life Community Survey, you can't get to that point if people don't feel safe. They don't feel safe crossing the road on a bike or with their family. In that survey, it says a majority of Temeculans would consider using a bike for transportation if they felt safer. 69% indicate that the roads aren't safe enough for families to bike on. 63% said they would bike if they felt safer. And I know Matt and his team are doing a terrific job getting us there, but I think that the active transportation element is key. And on a side note, the CDC currently has a program called Active People, Healthy Nation. It's a national initiative led by the CDC to help 27 million Americans become more physically active by 2027. Increased physical activity can improve health, quality of life, and reduce healthcare costs. And thank you to Gary for that piece of information as well. The only other thing I would add under the arts, culture, and lifelong learning, again, the city's doing a terrific job, but it'd be great to document it, is finding out how many higher education seats we have currently. Because similar to what Tammy was saying, I left for college because there was no opportunities here. Right. How many of our youth end up going to San Marcos, either Palomar or Cal State San Marcos or elsewhere, right? So with the expansion of the MSJC campus here, that's a huge improvement, and I think it needs to be documented as a standard for quality of life.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to go ahead and offer now, and moving forward, I want to reference a little bit, circling back, and I know that Kathy was reflecting on the updated master plan. We wanted to, as you kind of see by the bubbles, and maybe you're familiar with it, it's just recently updated, just as kind of a reminder of what the master plan addresses in some major I guess audiences from perspective, between senior special needs, low income teens, those who are homeless, and multi-generational perspectives. The master plan has some special focus areas for them. And then in the middle, you kind of see some of the kind of activity-based elements in the master plan as well. And then last and certainly not least are more about, first of all, outreach and communication about opportunities for community service, but also those larger scale community events and music and art festivals. So this is a Good. So I wanted to, the reason we wanted to just reference this very briefly for you is that with the recent update, as Kathy was mentioning, staff will look at that data and the indicators that we can pull forward from that master plan to bring into this element as well.
And then the way we communicate everything that we're learning, that's going to be critical. We're talking about communication now.
Right. So excellent. Okay, thank you. So with that, what I want to do is move us to economic prosperity. And the note I want to make about about healthy and livable communities, that if there are specific projects, given what we've talked about so far, we'll work on refining the goals, right? So we didn't complete an exercise in changing the goals tonight, but we talked a lot about some of your ideas about how they can change and indicators, right, that we should be thinking about changing. If there are specific projects in healthy and livable communities that you think would be critical to that, like again, remember 10 years ago it was about medical facilities, right? It was about tennis courts. If there are specific things like that, get to specific projects, please do kind of send those to us through Matt, and we can kind of put those in the mix. But I mean, we'll be back to you to, of course, talk about those in more detail. We really want to focus now these days about, again, articulating those goals with you, thinking about how we measure them, and then from there, the project speaks to kind of the how, at least partially, right? So I want to just kind of mention that. But for now, I'm going to bring Doug back up, and he's going to talk about economic prosperity. As a quick time check, I want to let you know we are a little bit behind, frankly, about trying to wrap up by 8. I think we're going to go a little bit longer, closer to 8:15, 8:30. So I want to just give you a heads up on that. I apologize, we're going to run a little long, but I do want to make sure we spend hopefully as much time on economic prosperity as we just did. So with that, Doug, thank you.
Very good, thank you. So the economic prosperity core value, as you can see here, is focused on some of the things we've already talked about in terms of a resilient and adaptable economy. So being able to respond to change as it occurs, but also providing jobs with good opportunities for advancement and an entrepreneurial environment. And we're going to kind of go through the same sequence of discussion here for this core value. So the prosperity goals, starting out with providing an entrepreneurial culture in the city, maintaining connection via broadband services, so infrastructure. Again, going back to natural resources, air quality, open space, et cetera, the different ways that quality of life also promote economic prosperity or reinforce it. Increase of urban amenities. So there are a lot of things here that we just talked about under healthy and livable communities, in a sense, are repeated here under economic prosperity. Then there are 2 goals that focus specifically on higher education. So the idea of expansion of CSU San Marcos and Mount San Jacinto Community College. So we know that a lot has transpired in the last 10 years there. And there's an additional goal of just broadening higher education opportunities for both the public and private sectors. Focus on tourism, an internationally known tourism destination. And then finally, revitalizing the city's aging commercial corridors. So are you going to do the same kind of, okay.
We're going to do that. Turn this off. So we're going to do a similar quick exercise here. Now that you're experienced, now that you're a pro with Mentimeter, we want to take a similar approach and just have some initial reaction from you about, again, these goals from 2010 and which you kind of think still resonate and are relevant today, which maybe are less so, but maybe we need to think about a little bit differently. Sorry, it's so small, but again, you do have a memo. Maybe before you're having a hard time reading on the screen or on your own, so I'll just definitely take a look there too. excuse me. 1 second.
Mr. Peters, while folks are finishing up, the policy statement included words like resilient, right? It might be good to flesh those out a little bit. Like resilient, economic resilience. Do we mean, recovering from a flood or a wildfire, pandemic? Do we mean, resilient as far as, economic downturns and so forth? I mean, it has a lot of different meanings. So I wonder that statement had a lot of loaded words there that have a different meaning to a lot of folks. And I wonder if we take some time to kind of define each one of those terms.
Sure.
It could be a theme that runs throughout the core values as well.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just getting the terminology, because there were so many words there that have a variety of meaning to folks.
Yeah.
So I'd hate to be vague, intentionally.
Agreed. It could be economic resiliency, financial resiliency, climate change, disaster, infrastructure. Terry's been sending me a lot of emails with information, which is good.
Just getting started. Yeah. But no, in all seriousness, I see it elsewhere too. In other work, other sustainability, right? That can mean many things to many different people. For example, resiliency, as you mentioned. A couple have mentioned infrastructure. So it is important to have that conversation about what it means for your context. Okay, good. Looks like most of you have weighed in. This is good. So just looking at kind of the current reflection here, the entrepreneurial culture with diverse, high-paying jobs, innovative global companies, right? Including biomedical. There was some thinking back then 10 years ago. The broadening of higher education opportunities, which you've already touched on here a little bit just recently in the conversation. Protecting the city's special natural resources, so air quality, open space, parklands, wine country, clean water that provide special quality of place. So, we were having the conversation a little while ago about those kind of basic needs as well. So another opportunity to think about how things might be recast, perhaps. Currently the fourth one, urban amenities. So those in-town housing, shopping, arts, culture, recreation, libraries, museums for all age groups. And then the aging commercial corridors into vibrant mixed-use centers, the connection to broadband network, the expansion of CSU San Marcos. And so, I'd like to hear a comment. It's currently this seventh one, the Cal State San Marcos, but look at, the broadening of higher education opportunities for both public and private. So, and tourism, of course. So, good. What are some thoughts here? What for you? What as you weighed in and things rose up, or not? What's resonating for you? Would love to hear from a couple people who maybe we haven't heard from tonight. Just coming out, eyeballing around. Ross, you want to weigh in some thoughts? What resonated for you here, or didn't, as the case may have been?
Well, you hit on it. Number 7 says foster expansion of CSU. It's already been done.
Mm-hmm.
No need to be up at the higher priority,
Yeah.
in my opinion. They already have a really world-class campus over here. Isn't it the one? No, what is that one? Oh, that's JC. Oh, okay. My mistake. Number 2 is actually, I apologize for that mistake. I could have sworn it was that one. The encouragement of broadening higher education opportunities. That's a pretty good location for it.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Can't really revitalize. Revitalize the city aging commercial. Yes, that in my opinion should have probably been like. I think I actually made it to be number 1.
Yeah.
Because of the economics that we are looking for, and we have such a large Jefferson corridor. For perfect example,
Right.
is that it's an aged community area, which needs to have new life in it. But in order to do that, you need to bring in the companies and businesses that are wanting to be there. But it also means that the city has to step up and enhance the traffic conditions, the roads, the sidewalks, the livable part of that area, to include having somebody come up. I mean, if you look at some of those buildings over there, they're set back so far away from the road that you drive through there at a great deal of speed and you don't even see the animal clinic, the emergency hospital clinic.
Yeah.
But you do see Starbucks and things like that because they're close to the road. So we've got a lot of parking over there, but we have a lot of small buildings. So that's my thought, is that should have been one or two at least.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, let's come around to Jeremy, and who else wanted to check, just if I can see hands here. We'll come to Kimberly, and then we'll come back around to Juan. And yeah, Jeremy and Kimberly, and then Juan. Go ahead.
So I'm our representative here from Mount San Jacinto College, and so I'm a little biased on this list, but I was surprised to see that we ended up on number 7, but obviously higher ed is number 2.
Yeah.
I was curious why it ended up there, but just to give you a bit of kind of update on where we are, MSJC is in the building, right? MSJC is offering classes in the old Abbott building. We're offering about 100 classes right now. And we're in talks with Cal State San Marcos. So we've been doing just some preliminary planning to look at what we can potentially do with them. My intention is to make sure that we go from talks all the way to, building really strong partnerships so that there is that, destination, bachelor's degree destination for students in Temecula.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. And again, I'll just offer, I think I do a lot of planning, right, and writing plans, but it's interesting. I think, this is happening, right? There's progress being made, some accomplishment. And I think, it does make sense that continued work can fall under an ongoing goal about broadening of higher education opportunities. So I think it's important to think about that too. That it's just because it's lower on the list, and similar to Ross's point too, just because, and again, this is our little poll here, just for conversation, is that it doesn't mean this still isn't important. There are things that we need to do, and the city has invested in helping to spur that and inspire that. So real quick, Ross, and then I'm going to come to just real brief.
Just a case in point is that my niece actually lived here in this area, and she wanted to become a nurse. Literally had to move out of state to get a program to become a nurse. And so we're losing all those people to other states. And pretty much when she's done, she says she's not going to move back because the jobs are over there as well, because she's taking the nursing program in a hospital that knows for a fact that when she graduates, she can go straight into that school, into that hospital.
So another example of that connection, we talked earlier about the needs for our professional capacity in medical health and mental health as well. And that has obviously connection to job opportunities and of your kids,
Right.
So thank you. So I want to come back to what I promised. I think I said, let's go Kimberly next, and then Kathy, and then we'll work our way around this way. Kimberly,
Well,
please.
I think some of my comments will be really to the group to, really, tourism wasn't a part of the program back in 10 years ago. So I think we have to put that into perspective. I think it was the Wine Growers Association that kind of participated, but we really want to educate the community about what tourism really is, for the fact we lost over, 5,000 to 8,000 jobs during the pandemic. But those are your restaurants. Those are your retailers. Those are the quality of life things that the community has. So it's not just tourism, it's destination marketing and management of just having a thriving community, because a lot of our employees do live and work here, and we're able to get off the roads to be here. So it's important for you to think of tourism differently. It's also sustainability of just making sure people are caring for our community when they come and visit, because this is our community and these are our amenities. And so we created a quality of life amenities. The other thing is branding and beautification, which is also freewayscape and off-ramps, and beautifying the community that has a sense of pride is another part of the branding and marketing, not just for a world-class destination, but to show that we have community pride that makes people want to come to your community, that allows you to go to work and walk to your retailer or go to your specialty gift shop. So it's important, I think, in this part of the plan that we do really redefine what tourism is, because it isn't just to have people come and take over our town. It's about being responsible and also being able to have amenities for the community, like special events and all those things that are cultural and diverse. So I think it's important for the education side for our group.
And I would add
Because
to
we will,
that,
it's
too.
like, I think too, I worked for a zoo for 20 years, and it's always hard for animals or people. And obviously, when you work for a zoo, it's always going to be about animals. And so you do need the chicken or the egg. And so I think we have to also think of that, because you're never going to prioritize those things like arts and culture. We're going to be at the bottom because we're going to be focusing so much on the people. So it's just important, I think, in our perspective as we keep moving through the process. It's like if we experience those things as residents, then a tourist is probably experiencing those too as part of our quality of life.
So, Kimberly, as we move forward to thinking about how we maybe recast some of these goals and update them, as you were just suggesting and requesting, how we can articulate them in ways not only speaks to the goal, but also contributes to that education, public education.
Well, we need to keep in mind that half of what Measure S sales tax generates comes from visitors. So they're basically paying half of, they're paying half of the improvements we make on this park. They're paying for half of the improvements we make on the road. Yeah. So it's a huge economic impact. And then wine country generates over $1 billion now, right?
Yeah. Yes. And lodging, there's a lot of categories I think makes up that. Your food and beverage industry makes a lot of money. In your small town, I mean, there's a lot of businesses that make up that large category. And it's not just healthcare. It's multiple segments within an industry that provides the quality of life.
Right.
So thinking of it like that.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And I want to encourage everybody as we continue, conversation similar to what Kimberly was reflecting on, how, as we reflect on these previously, how this different articulation, given where we are today and where we move forward, and we know how things will continue to be changing to the extent we can tell, how we articulate those statements, to better reflect that to the best we can. Well, we don't have our crystal ball, but we have a pretty good idea. We're seeing trends, so how we do that. So,
I think the last thing, it would be the entrepreneurial side, because I think that that's a really critical piece of entrepreneurship, is that what you're seeing of an industry that was not here 15 years ago, and it has morphed into being part of our identity that probably most people use for a geographical identity. So that's important, but I think some of the processes we have, not just for offering, higher paid jobs, it's for entrepreneurs just to be able to sustain a quality of life which they choose, whatever that affordability is, because they may not want the same things as what we've talked about. They don't want the same things as a 20-year-old today to a 50 or 60-year-old.
Great. Okay, thank you. So we'll go to Kathy, and then we'll come to Juan, and just checking, and we'll come back to Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm in complete agreement with number one. We need to build more high-paying jobs in this community. I think that will solve issues that we have in other areas. If we have more high-paying jobs here in our community, we'll have less people commuting to other areas. If we look at the one chart you gave us on the economic prosperity, we have a lot of vacancy in our commercial and industrial buildings. So we obviously have some capacity that employers can come here, and we have places to put them. Seeing the relationship with Mount San Jacinto down at number 7, I think we're missing a huge opportunity there. We need high-paying jobs, and I think that was a thing on number 1. We say biomedical cluster. Perhaps that needs to be changed. Biomedical maybe was what we thought was going to be it 10 years ago. Maybe that needs to be, high tech or comp sci, something broader like that. But I think we have a unique opportunity. We have people that need high paying jobs. We have vacant industrial commercial buildings that we could put businesses in. And we have Mount San Jacinto, Cal State Marcos here. We can uniquely create educational programs, degree programs. Like we have IDIQ, it's just the new cybersecurity company in Temecula, and they have like this huge pages-long list of employment opportunities, but they don't have the people to fill them. Maybe we can create these programs with Mount San Jacinto to where we can uniquely educate the workforce to bring those jobs here.
kind of connecting these two a little more intentionally.
Yes. And I
Okay.
don't know if maybe we saw number 7, we thought, oh, well, we already got Mount San Jacinto. It's open.
Check.
We did
Yeah.
it. We did it. But
Oh,
I
no.
think it goes deeper than that. It
Yeah.
goes into creating unique certificate programs, degree programs that we can go back to these high-tech firms and say, we got the building for you and we got the workforce that's trained and ready. Let's go.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to Juan Carlos, and I see a few more hands, and we'll look more closely at the indicators in a few minutes. Juan Carlos, and then
So I love where the discussion is really going.
Yeah.
I am fortunate to be representing Optiforms, a local manufacturing company. I'm the marketing specialist. I also am part of the Temecula Valley School District's. I'm on the advisory committee for the career and technical education pathways. Many of the pathways that are going back and being integrated down to the middle school levels and helping a lot of the kids sort of reintroduce them to a lot of what we consider like trade, as well as other areas that are still on that STEM side, still advanced. So I'm also the co-chair of the Southwest Manufacturing Council, representing a lot of manufacturing companies here in the Temecula Valley. We talk a lot about this very subject, and everything that's been said thus far, we're looking at an opportunity. There's a very big opportunity for us to integrate young people, to get them enthused, jazzed, engaged at every level, and to bring in manufacturing, all of the companies, be it biomedical, high tech, manufacturing, robotics, cybersecurity, and they all in some way reflect back to the pathways that are being implemented at the high schools. So there's a tremendous opportunity for us to integrate not just at all the way down to the middle school, but up through providing certificate programs and accreditation courses for high school students to be able to jump right into accredited pathways. So more of that is where I would like to see it. And it's not really, in much ways, it is represented with number 1, but it's not necessarily from the framework of just the entrepreneurial country. It's young people. It's providing young people a pathway to opportunities at large.
Well, and then they have to align with the community colleges too. So
Absolutely.
those pathways have to line up.
And it's not just arbitrary, it just fly in the sky, hey, this is really great, we just thought this is cool. There's been so much thought and effort that goes into every one of those pathways and helping serve this very community. And that can come full circle.
Great.
With that involvement from all the levels, from education through the industry partners that are created here and all the incoming businesses.
Great.
Great chance. I get a little bit, as you imagine, this is really for me an opportunity for us to really engage the community at multiple levels.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And I think as we appreciate your help and your thoughtfulness about how we can recast these, perhaps to some extent, to better reflect, these better connections, from middle school through to these pathway certificate programs. And
I just wanted to close on one idea that it's been implemented in other communities or centers of excellence, where and certainly that involves a much bigger discussion of how would that be created, but from the standpoint that the resources, the personnel, the volunteers, the parents, the students, it's all here, and I feel like this is the perfect time to address it.
As we look at the indicators too, by the way, and all the great work you're doing out there right now, I think Juan and Jeremy touching on it, all the continued work you're doing on the higher ed side, and as Kathy was touching on, is thinking about how we articulate, how the city, can help in tracking, and be a partner to that, of course, but also tracking specific indicators that will be helpful to keep this elevated, in terms of conversation and focus as to what you're all doing. So I wanted to circle back. Yeah, Amy, and then I wanted to double check. I think we've covered most. Come back to, I apologize. Ernesto, thank you. We'll go to Amy, Ernesto, and then back to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I have a past experience. I was on the development board at Pechanga on my reservation years ago, and I think it's so important. Part of what Ms. Adams is talking about is by having the community visitors, by having the tourism dollars come into the community, we are talking about thousands and thousands of tax dollars that do make a huge difference in our community as far as living goes. And so the reason why we always have to grow our tourism and grow how we craft who we are in that, and how just how we bring people in. There are so many visitors that are coming in, and that strengthens the community. And so I just think that is so important. It is not something to be overlooked, and it is very high paying jobs at times. There are chefs, like there are chefs. There are another big part from my experience there on the reservation is we have cogen plant operators that are not high degree graduates. They are vocational school graduates, and in my job now, I have students that are going straight to the 4-year university, and I have others that don't see themselves there. And so we need to connect the dots to the diesel mechanic that makes 6 figures, and to the programmer that can make 6 figures without the 4-year degree. And so I think we really have to rethink and change. College has changed.
Right.
And so now we need to take it all the way back. But I just always want to give kudos to how important the tourism dollars are, and then as well as that vocational piece.
Great, thank you.
So Amy, plus or minus 15 million a year is tourist dollars in sales tax in Temecula, or visitors, people come in. So it's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah, so tourism, I see like the low-hanging fruit of the city. Pretty much this is already an industry. And I'm just thinking on the top, I know we were talking about innovative and global companies and tech and all that stuff. And I think since we're barely building it from the ground up, we have to figure out what matches the DNA of the city, because tourism is already something that is already happening. And to give you an example, Iceland does a lot of Bitcoin mining. And why it's a good over there? Because 100% of their energy is green energy, and it's free. So for Bitcoin miners, makes sense to be in a place where their computers are going to be ventilated properly, because it's freezing over there, and also electricity is free.
Yeah.
And then there's no way that you can bring that technology to a city. I'm not saying Temecula, but what I'm saying is that these can ruin a city for sure. And then what happened in San Jose also with Silicon Valley, it raised the prices of everything. So now people can't afford to live properly, to have a quality of living. Well, yeah, some can, but the normal people, it's harder. So now at this point, I think it's better to decide what type of industries we want to bring to the city.
Yeah, what do we have to offer for assets and in terms of
that doesn't
workforce
interfere with the part of the DNA of the community, because otherwise you're going to create so much going on traffic and a lot of the stuff that it's not going to be good for the tourism.
Housing, other impacts. So excellent, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and then I'll come to you, Darlene. But we are going to take such a look at the indicators as well.
So real quick, I've heard a lot here, and I think this plan would benefit immensely from a conceptual model of sorts, right? Because we're all talking about, I think, the same things, right? You have a job market here that's based largely on tourism, which needs its employment support from the higher education sector, right? If people want to advance in their career, whether it's hospitality, tourism management, culinary arts, whatever it is, we need that level of support, right? And what I don't want us to get into the trap, because it is a little bit dated when we talk about biotech and all this. Not that it doesn't exist here, but as Temecula was, years ago planning to become the next Silicon Valley, we became a premier, tourism and wine destination instead, right? So rather than try and, open up an engineering program where we don't have any local jobs, I'm not saying we shouldn't think about that, but we definitely need to feed the industries that have made Temecula what it is. But as we're contemplating, so creating that conceptual model that shows the links between, the job market and sort of the pay scales of what it takes to physically live within the city as well, right? Because you're talking about a job market that does not necessarily just have 100% of its employees in high-paying jobs, right? And I hear that a lot about Temecula, and it comes off, I don't want to be offensive here, but it comes off a little bit elitist in some respects, because it's like, we all want high-paying jobs. Well, but all the other folks that are working in this city, and look, I work in higher education as well. If you're talking about hiring a new faculty member at the local college, and then you let that faculty member know that the median house price is above $600,000 in the city of Temecula, you see what I'm, so I'm just saying we need to find that balance between, the affordable, the attainable housing, what the industry growth needs are, what the jobs are, where those sectors are that have the highest potential for growth. Healthcare is another example of that. I mean, we have a huge opportunity here, but I always thought it was funny that we, had a nursing program in the city of Temecula before we had a hospital, right? I mean, it was like, you talk chicken and egg, and it was like that, to me was a bit convoluted. And the only other thing I would say too is diversity breeds resilience, right? So if you create a job market, I mean, we were lucky as a city to have weathered, COVID as resiliently as we have. And I know, Kimberly, I know we talked quite a bit about the hotel use and all of that over the past, 18 months and all that. And we did not have the same numbers that other communities did, but it's also because we have a lot of other markets here that aren't just hospitality, tourism, and management. And so, that to me was a huge red flag that said our economic prosperity is not dependent on one industry. We have some very strong singular industries, but that, that strong foundation and diversity is what's going to give us that prosperity.
Yeah.
But again, it's that portfolio of jobs, portfolio of pay, and housing options that's going to make it work. Because if
that
all
model,
we do, exactly, right? So, so what have we resolved? Because we keep talking about traffic and air quality. What have we resolved if we put a bunch of high-paying jobs that allow, a lot of our local residents to live and work here, but then the service
traffic.
industry, everybody has to drive into, it just, we haven't resolved any issue, right? So so some sort of conceptual model that helps
More
graphically
holistic
demonstrate
view.
that.
Very excellent. Darlene, go ahead, and then Doug's going to talk about the indicators.
I just wanted to address that I see Temecula as kind of an economic hub for many unincorporated areas around us. I know I certainly see that in healthcare. I mean, I know by zip code, everybody that I'm treating that is in, Anza, Warner Hot Springs, Aguanga, Paula, Palma, Fallbrook. I mean, everybody around us that doesn't have the economic, diversity that we have here in Temecula. I think we need to keep that in mind, that many individuals come to the city for shopping, for for different things and services that we can provide, and there's probably an opportunity to grow that aspect of the fact that we're a hub here, and there's many spokes that we are serving that aren't residents of the city.
You're the big city for some of the smaller surrounding areas. So
That has
thank you,
actually
Darlene.
continued, even though cities around us have gotten Costco. I remember when ours was the only Costco within many miles, and it was crazy. But we've been able to maintain that customer base and the high retail return. So,
Well, let's talk a little bit about, speaking of numbers, let's talk a little bit. Doug's going to give us an overview here, and then let's come back to you and talk more about how we're thinking about measuring economics.
Right, and I'm going to try to group this a little bit by some of the themes that we're just talking about. So the first two here, employment and household income, kind of relate to the quality of jobs and the type of jobs. So, and recognizing that in 2010, we were just coming out of a major recession, and we are still in a recession, but we're thinking this is going to be a much shorter kind of event. And so, as I look through a lot of these indicators and the measurements that we're taking were just 1 year from 2009 to 2010, what happened. So what I've tried to do here is provide a little more perspective and do the 10 years between 2010 and 2019 before everything fell apart last year, to kind of get a better sense of where we really are. So the employment rate was, how many is kind of the reverse of the unemployment rate. So how many people who want to work have jobs? That's gone up, was 90%, it's up to 93% in 2019. Household income grew at a inflation-adjusted rate of 1.5% per year for that entire 10-year period. So that is really a very good indicator of the income of the people living here, has been very solid. But I want to switch gears, and this table, which I also put in the memo, shows the actual jobs in Temecula. So these are not all people that live here, but they're people that work here. And at the bottom line there, there has been a small decline in the total number of jobs in the city. And if you look at a lot of these sectors, it carries across a lot of different sectors. Now, the good news is you still have, at 62,000 jobs, more jobs than you have labor force in the community. There's about 58,000 workers that live in the city. So one of the metrics that we often use in getting Mayor Pro Tem to the model that you're talking about is, what makes these things work? Well, one of the key metrics is having enough jobs for the people who live here. That's kind of the first level. And then the second level is what we were talking about. How well do those jobs match the skills and experience and workforce needs of the people who live here? So we can do more analysis of that to see. It is positive that business and professional services, which is basically encompasses technology sectors, has been a growing sector. Health services has been a growing sector, education, and retail. So there's been a number of positive things, but also some concern about whether the mix of jobs in the city is generating income, but is it generating job opportunities going forward? The county overall had 40% increase during the same period, but a lot of it is, big scale warehouse and distribution that you wouldn't put in Temecula. So we have to recognize you have a different economic mix here. Okay, and then housing and development, the Housing Affordability Index. When this was calculated in 2010, they had some data about entry-level housing. That's not a standard metric, and so there's no standard definition for that. So when we updated it, we used median median housing price and median household income. That's more standard. And so on that basis, things have deteriorated. Well, we all know that. The housing market's gotten much tougher today than it was 10 years ago. And keeping in mind that the recession last time was a housing bubble burst, so housing prices cratered, things got more affordable for a while, but now they're back to where they are. So the Housing Affordability Index is a concern. Building permits, those have gone up and down, generally been pretty positive, though, more recently. So even though there's a negative on the commercial, that's only a one-year drop. Those have been actually increasing pretty well over the 10 years. Vacancy rates, that's an interesting issue. They're all double-digit. And yet, when I talked to Christine Damco, the economic development manager for the city, there's not a surplus of land for new development, for new businesses coming in. That's kind of short. One of the issues the general plan may need to address, but maybe the existing building stock isn't meeting the needs of the businesses that want to expand. So that's, gets into one of the things we talked about before of revitalizing our older commercial cores. That may well be hindering business development because you've got a lot of older buildings that are not being utilized. Sales tax. So here's a major bright spot. Per capita sales tax, you were in the top 15% 10 years ago. Now you're in the top 13%. And as we've just heard, tourism has a big piece of that. But in general, and that's a major piece of the city's economic or fiscal health in balancing its budget. And then tourism. Tourism has done very well. The occupancy rates up until this 2020 were up over 70%, which would have been the goal at the time, well above where they were in 2010. And the transient occupancy revenues, again, a major revenue component for the city, have been growing at over 5% a year during the 10 years. And so that is also very positive. So they're tremendous contribution to the economy and to local tax revenues from that sector. And then finally, broadband. It's very difficult to get a really solid metric on who has coverage and who doesn't because all the maps for that are proprietary. And so we weren't able to explicitly update the 80% metric, but we do know from just the stakeholder interviews that we've been doing, there are still gaps. There's still places in the city where business doesn't have the level of capacity that they'd like.
Exactly where every one of those gaps is.
I'm sure you can, yes. So we need to create a map and pursue that. So that's, anyway, where we are with updating the indicators.
Yeah. So thoughts here, and as we talked earlier about the, for instance, a more kind of holistic model, for example, there can be, I would imagine, a lot of really interesting, robust kind of how we measure indicators with a model like that coming out that we'll look forward to developing. Are there other kind of more specific indicators or considerations you think kind of aren't reflected here that we should be, more closely looking at? Kimberly, please.
I wanted to mention back about the jobs
Yeah.
was automation, because I know like in the agriculture side, a lot of our industry is changing over to automation. And so they're replacing, just like you're seeing, transportation is another one, because we have the shared economy. So the shared economy is kind of taking away. So just so we track, and how do you merge that into, I know that there was talk about the city limits is TOT is going down. It's because we have the shared economy with vacation rentals, which just increased to $45 million this last month. I mean, this last year. So we just grew our industry from 60 million to over 90 million because the customer's choosing something different. So those are important, those trends, and how we stay and manage and track those trends and somehow in the data that we have. I would say that's important. But back to the tourism tracking, we do the economic impact study, which we do measure occupancy, but we also do an average daily spend. And that's where Marianne and Matt are so keen on being able to say, it's a $1.3 billion travel industry, because we take a day tripper and we can track by how much a day tripper spends in our town by retail, food and beverage, and the things they do. And then we can do the overnight stay. So that could be maybe something that you add is like the impact study that has more categories, because you're not, you're only as I mentioned earlier about it's retail and food and beverage and all these other things. So it's a traveler that comes out from 50 miles. And then you have your regional traveler, which is kind of what Darlene was talking about, your local person who's coming into town. We separate all those people out so we can talk true numbers. To tell you where those people are coming.
Great, excellent.
Absolutely.
Some other thoughts on indicators. What you see is how we might further refine how we're measuring and tracking progress and economic prosperity. Others that you feel, Juan Carlos.
It's a quick question, though. I know that it's been discussed, the ideas of diversity, and of course, how much is it broken out, and is it grouped into subcategories that are falling into the bigger buckets? Are there how many, and is that worthy of us tracking over time as well?
You mean how much can they disaggregate that data?
Yeah.
A lot, right.
On the
well,
we do that from our industry, but it's something to consider as we talk about the conversation of growing some of that, diversity of those.
Especially
the population.
Yeah, especially as Mr. Rand suggested, it being tracked over time, every year, grades coming out. Is it really, and if this is really sort of one of those points that we want to drive home in terms of that, how are we addressing that diversity? The transparency is everything.
Yeah. Right. Yep. And I know we'll want to be thoughtful about, what are we can certainly expand and have a longer list of indicators, I imagine, and have more work for tracking stuff. But I know that no one's interested in just kind of creating more data for that sake. But how are we thoughtful about those? If we're going to disaggregate, for example, a lot of great experiences, great model that Kimberly's, on the tourism side about how being able to unpack a lot of that data. What are some similar examples of where we can disaggregate some specific, either some of these indicators, other indicators that we don't have yet, that will help us have a better sense? I know, again, thinking about, the conceptual model that the Mayor Pro Tem was mentioning, I would imagine.
As far as Mayor Pro Tem goes, you can never have too much data.
No, but I think it's a good point, because I think that's it, where we have to get where we can bring all these touch points into one dashboard that actually pulls in all of our data there. And that technology is out there. I think just, again, figuring out what those priorities are, because we don't have to do the old dinosaur.
Right.
There are new ways of doing it.
For the benefit of the group, as part of the general plan update, we're planning for a dashboard of indicators for tracking annually and over time.
Right. Absolutely. It's very frequent, kind of more regular updates. And yeah, so excellent. Yeah, Mayor Patton.
So I'm wondering too if we split out some of the bits of data. So productivity versus spending, right? So and I think Kimberly was kind of alluding to this earlier. It's we list say how much TOT, right? But that relationship of TOT is based on a percentage of the cost, right? So what we're missing, I mean, hotel use is a great example. So if the cost of staying in the hotel increases, then you'd get this potentially an artificial increase in hotel use, right? I mean, that's what it looks like, but maybe the total number of rooms or nights hasn't changed, right? Or vice versa. Maybe, we're a flat line, but we're not tracking that, the price went up and the occupancy went down all at the same time, right? So I think productivity versus actual spending, we need to kind of keep track of those two, regardless of the metrics that we're using. And then to make sure that we're adjusting those dollars too, right? And that sort of brings me to the last one, which is the idea of inflation. So, it may be nice to see that the cost of staying in a hotel in Temecula is increasing, but that may have a negative effect as well, right? A chilling effect on its occupancy. So, so at some point, yeah, exactly, right? So whether we're talking about car sales or visits to Costco or whatever it is, or even tuition, right, at the local college and university. I mean, as those numbers start to change, I think we need to be able to track that and tie it back to some of these metrics.
Yeah, it's not necessarily just about up or down, it's about implications for up or down. So down may not necessarily be bad, right? Just if the risk of oversimplifying. But yeah, Ross, please.
You are tracking through the ADR, average daily rates of hotels? Is that how you're doing it?
Yeah, there's lots of things.
There's a lot of variables.
I think it's a good point though, because I think that's really what it is. It's like you can make, in COVID, we got to see that. We made more. People are changing their business model because they did better with less and they don't have the employees to service, so they're learning to alter their business. So that's why we have to make sure we're kind of fluid with the tracking.
Well, but artificially, again, going back to the data piece, though, one of the things that we saw at a recent meeting up in Sacramento that presented on the economics of the COVID, and and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I think Randy, I think you were at that meeting too. Basically what they presented was this massive uptick nationally of average household income during COVID, right? This massive uptick. And then as it's explained, it was a massive uptick because people who had high paying jobs in management and other positions typically kept those positions, but the service industry and retail and all those jobs were lost. So it wasn't that salaries actually increased, it was that there was a massive population that all lost their jobs. So it looked like, right? So that's why I think, we need to be able to tell the data story accurately, that if we are saying, oh, look at how prosperous we are in this thing, that may not be a true indicator of prosperity because we may have lost an entire sector of employment at that same time.
Right, absolutely.
Now, to the point though, is something that's sort of interesting, the theme of technology and use of technology to measure all this over time. I haven't actually seen that as an indicator. So how we call this out is that we should be using all of this available technology and coordinating in a way that does it need to be called out as such so that we all properly utilize what we have available to us? Do we have to necessarily call it out in this scope and for it to be
how it should be measured, all the indicators?
Use technology.
Communication is key. I'm going back to that every single time. They won't use it if they don't know that it's there, available.
So making all of that available as much as possible and then connecting the dots,
right?
So what have you? But
okay, good. I do want to check. I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. I appreciate you all staying a little late. So yeah, absolutely. We can come to Ross. Was there anybody else who wanted to check it? Sorry, Ross. Before I called in. Yeah, go ahead, Ross, please. Thank you.
The one thing that we kind of went all the way around this little elephant is the affordable housing. In order to keep the constituents in this area, our local townspeople and everybody in here, we need to look at the affordable housing. And right now we're building a lot of single family homes out on Butterfield, Roapaw. And yet, one of the things that we keep hearing is that we're in a water shortage, we're getting brownouts, we're getting all of this. And we're not looking at the infrastructure cost of building affordable housing. Now, I tried to build 8 houses in Moreno Valley. By the time I budgeted, it was over $600,000 for that house.
Yeah.
That's including this infrastructure. There's no way an average person making $20 an hour, $40,000 a year is going to afford that house.
Right.
And yet, when you go in with a proposal to the city, and I'm not talking about our city, I'm talking any city.
Sure.
The amount of money that you have to spend in order to get that house even off the books to start building is causing a great deal of grief to the developer. So what we need to do, and in fact, I firmly believe, is that we locate land that's already designated by the cities, and it's already got a $10,000 to do the whole work. But you know what I mean, is that all that money is a fee, $10,000, period. Instead of SoCal Edison wanting a fee, EMW wants a fee, Rancho Water wants a fee.
Right.
It's all into that. So now that package for that person to build that house is $40,000 less than it would have been. And that's passed on to the consumer.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that we need to really start, I mean, if we want affordable housing, we have to be aggressive with the affordable housing strategy.
Absolutely. And I know the housing element work that's been going on and coming up with the general plan element, the general plan update, that's also going to be a space where we're going to be able to dive deeper on these strategies just like this, starting with the QLMP, to your point.
Well, also the whole thing is that EMWD, put a sewer line right down the middle of our main street, and do you think they would reduce their increases for the 2020? No. So by the time you build a piece of property in this area, you're adding $2 or $3 million depending on how many EDUs. And my God, a developer can't afford that because now he started out with a $10 million project. It's now 13.
Right. Okay.
And we can't sustain that type of
So that
issue.
I think point well taken, Roz. I think as we track indicators, cost to build housing, should be a factor we should look at more very closely. We do need to wrap up. I'm going to ask for fast comments, please. Carl, and then Kimberly will come back to you. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what it means by 77. Does that mean 77% of people in Temecula could afford what?
This was countywide. First of all, it's not Temecula, but it's 77% of first-time home buyers could buy a house that was priced for a first-time home buyer. So
Today it's 33%?
Yeah, today it's for the median, meaning, right. So yeah, now it's only 33%.
So if possible, because I know we want more data, is it possible to get something like Temecula specific?
I think we can do that. I was trying to match up to what they had done, which was county, but the housing element's just been done, so I'm sure we can calculate that for Temecula.
Southwest County Board of Realtors has all that.
Yeah.
Good. And then,
Yeah, I think mine was about housing too, about homeowners and then also seasonal homeowners somehow to be able to track, as you see other desert communities have, where they know 50% of their community is and would that be something we'd want to look at over time? If people that from the early 80s that live here, have they moved out and now use this as a source of revenue to rent out their homes on an annual basis? So seasonal versus.
All right. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all for that, those inputs. And so I do want to, similar to if there are getting out to more specific projects that you think can help potentially to deliver, the how, do let us know through Matt, and please send that our way. We have much more to do to cover and address that, as well as by bringing back, revised goals, and that'll give us a better sense of the how. So we have more to come. So I want to give you a little preview of our, I apologize, meeting number 3, not meeting number 2. My fault on the slide. We're going to talk about a safe and prepared community, sustainable city, and transportation, mobility, and connectivity. And I think a couple points that came up tonight from some of you will come back. Some of those points come back here. As much as we have these core values, as we've seen, there's connection across these core values, right? They're not in silos. But I do want to highlight, as we're exhibited here tonight, there is so much to cover and address, and we're trying to really maximize all of our time with you, be able to hear from all of you. We're asking you respectfully, again, I've messed up my numbers. Meeting number 3 is November 18th. I apologize. And meeting number 4 is January 20th. But we're asking that we extend those to end by 9 p.m. So wanted to give you that heads up now. We'll take, in a 3-hour meeting, we'll take a break in between. Appreciate you sitting straight through now 2.5 hours, knowing we need to give some time and rest. We'll have some more refreshments here, but wanted to just give you that heads up. With 3 topics to cover compared to 2, we have a lot of ground to cover. So wanted to give you that heads up and also let you know we'll be hitting the ground running with your friends and neighbors here. Literally this month through into the, leading into the holidays, we'll be launching more communications about the QLMP with the project webpage, some social media through the city's channels. And I want to encourage and ask all of you, please, as Blue Ribbon Committee members, want to utilize your communication networks, your formal networks through your organizations to help push out and share when we have community engagement activities, a community workshop, a community questionnaire to fill out online. We are, by all means, appreciate your help in pushing those out to your networks. So we're looking at doing a number of those things, an online questionnaire, pop-up activities, heading out to the farmer's market, perhaps at the mall, literally having a booth so we can capture people coming by and connecting with them. Your good old-fashioned workshops, maybe 1 or 2 that are more webinar-based. Some people feel more comfortable doing it over Zoom. We respect that. Of course, staff will be making update presentations to city boards and commissions in the next few months. And as was talked about earlier, we will think about a school curriculum approach overall. We might launch that now, between now and the holidays. We might look at that into the early new year. But we're very excited about that, as Matt mentioned earlier. It's about connecting with youth in the community and bringing them into the process overall. So let us know if you have any questions on that. And last and certainly not least, we're going to try and punch up this campaign a little bit. We've got a new emerging brand and logo design here to try and build some awareness of this project overall. So what's that? There you go. Yeah, the clump. So we're gonna move forward and kind of branding this process a little bit more intentionally and building some awareness of it out there in the community. So let us know if you have any feedback on that. And Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for any public comment.
Any final comments, anyone? I'll have a good time.
Yes.
We had a little thunderstorm out there, a little entertainment, and I think it sounded like it was pouring rain. So, if you're inside, good. If you're not, run. So, Ross.
Yes. You're asking for us to submit or send out emails or things like that. Might I make a suggestion that the Blue Ribbon community get an email address that says blueribbon@temecula.gov? So if I send out emails, they're not coming to my personal email or to my company email.
That would be going to you.
Because
right?
I want to send out a lot of stuff, but I want it to be dedicated to a box.
Yeah, that's good. That's smart.
Okay, would you please?
Good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great night.